And in finding those notes and forms templates, if you end up checking this section while we're on the call and you don't see it, it's because there's a permission associated with that too. So we'll go into that section as well. Then once we eventually do get into those notes and forms, we'll talk about dynamic versus static titles. So you're able to look in your files much more cleanly. So instead of having 200 things listed as a session note, you're able to say, okay, the client's first name, last name, the date of that appointment, really anything that you'd like. After that, we'll talk about the new user interface. So it's really fantastic. We have a lot of new features that we've added to this, and it's much more user-friendly. At that point, we'll start building out things like putting in drop-ins for the client and the provider and the payer, playing around with some of those form fields. Now, the services, these are all those that come from the timesheet. So that'll be our next webinar, with the Learn webinar following after that. So getting really deep into those Learn drop-ins. Super exciting thing about this is as of today, we've just rolled out the session summary, which I think groups will really, really like. After that, we'll just start building out a form. So I have a form already set up, and I'm just gonna, I have a form in mind that I see a lot of groups, looking at the information that they typically have. So hopefully some of these sections will be useful for you to emulate and kind of make into your own. So we'll talk about adding in text and how to format it, looking really at tables to keep things really organized and clean. Using those same drop-ins, which we have listed up here, making those drop-ins required. Then of course, saving your template. The really great thing is you build a template that you love and you want to use it over and over again for different things. Very, very simple, just to hit a copy button and modify it towards your needs. The one thing that we'll go over today, so there are two steps that we can take to make a client note from a template. One is, of course, attaching it to the service codes. That'll be the next webinar we do. But this first one, we'll talk about creating notes within a client profile itself. So I'll be jumping back and forth, looking at if there are any questions. So if you do have any questions throughout this training, I will stop over there. I'll be able to see that. I have the little section open. So if anything pops up, just let me know, and I'll address that as quickly as I can. So the first thing that we'll do is talk a little bit about permissions. So right here, if you are not able to see note and form templates, well, actually, let me go there first. So the steps to get to these templates is you'll click on your name twice. I'm in my organization account, so I've got pretty much everything. But if you don't see this next section that we're talking about, that's the permission that we'll go back to and look at. So I've clicked on my name twice, and then I come to this section called Settings. Now, when I go to Settings, the note and form template, this is where we'll build out all those system forms to use, in the client profile or connected to timesheets. So if you do not see this button, it means you need note and form manage. So the area that you can tell your admin to go to give this to you is here in your permissions. I'm just going to click on my admin one. And then right here in notes, there are two that are listed. This one, the create and complete a note or form for client or provider, that permission will allow you to go into the client profile and create your notes. But this one is the one that you'll need. It's the ability to create, add, delete, manage the notes in general. So anybody has this, or anybody in your organization that has this is able to build out these templates and work together with you. Great thing is, somebody builds it out there, every single person has access to it. So that's where we'll go to next. So I'm going to click on my organization account twice again and come to the settings section. So when I come to settings, I'll go to that note and form template section, and you'll see something like this. Now, all of these red ones, these are system forms. These are the ones that we internally have provided for you. So if you like a form, you're able to just click on it, add a new one, you're golden. We'll talk a little bit more about the copying, but as I scroll down a little bit further, I've got a bunch of different ones that are listed in gray as custom. These are the ones that I built out in my own account that anybody who has access to my account can use them. So whenever you see red in system, think provided to you internally by the CR team, and then custom ones that you've built out yourself. So I'm going to click on New Template, just as I'm sure a lot of you have seen that anytime you want to add something new, the blue Add New button or the New Template. So we'll click on that. So welcome to our brand new user interface, which I have to say is gorgeous. I love this. It's now a lot wider than it used to be. You're able to have everything that you need on this single page. The very first thing that we'll go to is, how do you title this? You know, what type of form is it? So I've got my little pencil icon right here. And in this case, I'm going to build out a session note with you guys. Cool. So you could have a simple title. This was what I was referencing in the beginning, where I said you could just have 150 files called session note if you really want to, because whatever this title is, that's what your file name is. But we have this section right here called Create Dynamic Title. And this makes organizing your files much more clean. So what I can do here is I can say, you know what? I want to know whose session note this is and when it was created. So if I say client's full name, and I want to have, let's just say a dash, client's full name and client creation date, or actually, let's do it this way. And let's see here. I'm clicking on, I got to open it up. Sorry about that. Cool. So what we've got there is now my files are going to be called session note. It's going to tell me the client's full name and the date of service. So if there was a timesheet attached to this, it would pull that as well. So when I hit continue, I'm all set. Now, the reason it gave me that little warning is I need to have at least one field in here before I can save this form. So let's go right into this. So right here, regular text editor, just like in Word. We'll start at the client and we'll go through provider and payer. The reason we'll start with these three, we'll kind of skip over service right now because that's the next webinar, but client, provider, and payer, all of that information lives right here in the contacts module. So if I open up client, if I want to put in a client's first name, last name, full name, or middle initial, I'm able to do that. Same thing with contact. If I ever wanted to bring in a client's address or their home phone number. Now, our notes and forms, you can use it for anything, any type of information that you have in CentralReach, whether it's potentially a billing invoice or talking about a progress report or an incident report or even an employee review form. So we have lots and lots of options that can really can allow you to build out any type of form you want. So some of these may not be applicable to you, but if you want them, we do have them available. So right in here, the basics. Now again, we're still in the client profile from the contacts module. So you're able to pull in their date of birth, their age, their client ID. If you wanted their social security number on a form, you could do that. Here in health, this comes from our health records section. So if you do eventually put in a learner's allergies or their immunization history, you're able to pull that in as well. So we have claims. So we've got my diagnosis. So if we wanted to pull that in, you can as well. Now, some of you, kind of just in my experience talking with some groups, is a little bit about metadata. Now, what's really cool about metadata is it's creating custom fields for one of these. So if there's something that you want that you don't have, like an authorization period is what I see a lot, you're able to create that. So we'll do a slight sidebar, a little bit of into practice management, but I think it's really useful to go through how to create these custom fields. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a separate page. Now, the steps to get to these metadata to create them, I'm going to click on my contacts module and go to utilities and tools. Now, when that takes me to this page, we've got it right here, metadata settings. So I've got a few different options here, but I'm just going to add in a new one. So let's talk about an employee for a second. We've got whatever you want your metadata field to be. So in this case, I want to know when were my employees hired. What I can do here is I can title a field called employee hire date, and I can tie it right to the provider. So that means when I go back to my provider's drop-in, I can I can put in their date. So I don't need a description for that, but I'm going to say my type of answer is a date. Now, mind you, anything I fill in these, I'm able to pull to a note and form. But my favorite part, my favorite part here, but one of my favorite parts in CentralReach is this. Show this field on the face sheet. So let's go to one of my employees. Just going to quick refresh, confirm that it's there, employee hire date. I will go right to one of my employees and coworkers. So let's see right here. Let's go right to Cloud, because I want to know when Cloud was hired. Oh, by the way, as somebody else pointed out on my note, these are all Final Fantasy characters. So if anybody's wondering where that is from, so I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and right here, I can fill in the employee's hire date. So Cloud is one of my BCBAs. Already got my label, and he was hired a couple of years ago. So let's just click back a little bit. Let's see here. Let's say he was hired in April 2015. So because I put April 2015, all I have to do is save it. And now, whenever I go to Cloud's profile, that'll be listed right there. The super cool thing about this is if you have something like the authorization period. So let's go back to my metadata settings. With the authorization period or even the authorization end date, you can have this on a client's profile from the get-go, that if you need to know this information very, very quickly, like let's go to Sabin. So with Sabin, we have, it looks like I don't have that one linked in here yet, but I do have the peanut allergy. If I did have his authorization end date, it would be listed right there. So that's a quick little overview of what the metadata settings do. They are effectively just custom settings for whatever drop-ins you want. Now, additional context, that's just if you've got other additional contact information that isn't listed in this section. Great thing is, provider works the same exact way as the client. So you're able to pull in the first name and the last name. And great thing is, you've got credentials to pull in if you want to. You can pull in something like an NPI number. Now, in the form that we'll build out here, I've got a lot of these samples just to kind of keep it really general. That's something that I see a lot with groups. And then if you wanted to pull in their address or their cell phone number, so typically when you're completing a form, if you want the parents to see it, you have your office number, you have your cell phone, potentially you'll put in your email. So any way for the parents or guardians to contact you. So service, very, very, very brief overview of this, and we'll go over this in much more detail on the next call. Single service, think H codes and 99 codes. You're pulling information from the timesheet related to one code. Whereas multiple services, you're using something like T codes. It's going to pull that same information from the timesheet, and it'll just effectively bridge those two codes together. Since the appointment, you're billing both at the same time, like first 30 minutes versus after that. Now, payer comes from the contacts module as well. So think, this is the way I'm getting paid. So if you want to pull in labels, notes, the employer or school name, any information related to the credit card, whether it's an Amex or MasterCard, Visa, the last 4 digits, or even the expiration date. And then if you are accepting insurance, what's the insurance company? What's that plan? When is their coverage from or to? What's the copay? What's even that insurance's phone number so you can contact them? And subscriber works pretty much in the same way. So we've got our insured ID or our group number. The form fields, I'll do a very, very, very fast run through of this, but the form that we're going to build out will address the majority of these. So checkboxes, exactly what it sounds like, and we'll put a lot in this form, where you'll be able to just select the option that you choose. The date, this date is different than the date from a timesheet. So in the timesheet, this is saying, hey, that's the date of my appointment. Versus this one, this is manually put in. So for something like an incident report, if you want to specify the date or the date of really anything, even if something was a date from 6 months ago, you're able to put that in there as well. Drop downs, it just allows you to create a bunch of different options to pick one. Now, right down here, you're going to see 3 that say text. And sometimes this gets a little bit confusing, but all you need to remember for here is areas are big, Text boxes are small. So with a text box, you can write maybe a sentence or so, maybe two, versus the area, you can write as much as you want. The text box or the text area will expand as far as you would like. The main distinction between text area and rich text area is this one. I have the ability to bold, italicize, and underline. Coming down to time, time is just manual. You're able to just put in that, it's not automated. It'll give you a little icon and say, hey, what time did this occur? Number, exactly what it sounds like. It will limit you to just putting in numbers. Signature, we'll talk a little bit more about because there's some ins and outs to it. So before I start building out this sample form, because I'm sure that's what you guys were all waiting for, seeing the ins and outs of that, I'm going to quick go over these questions and see if there's anything I can address. Let's see here. Cool. So the first thing that we'll do is I'm going to go right to the center of the screen. So I didn't see. I saw lots of comments about my little theme that we've got here. So what I'll do first is I'm just going to go right to the center of the page, just like Word, and I'm going to put a little note right here, and I'm just going to say, you know, insert logo here. And what a lot of groups will do is they'll use this little insert edit / image. So this is just a placeholder. So if I did have an image, I could put it in there. You can also, depending on the image type, and I believe the JPEGs, if you just drag and drop the image in, it will do that as well. So one warning that I will give you is if you are dragging and dropping things from a Word document. Now, depending on the formatting you have, always select it and hit this little clear formatting button. The reason for that is sometimes some of the Word formats won't translate nearly as well. And this just says, turn it back to the way it should be. Just strip the formatting, strip the bold, strip the italics, you know, strip the font, make it really, really general. So if you ever import things like a cut and paste from Word, make sure to do that. The second piece from that is my recommendation. If you're going to be cutting and pasting tables, it's so much faster just to build out a table manually. So 2 little notes, and we'll address that a little bit later. So I'm going to make this center. And the first thing that I'm going to do is go right to the tables. So I want to put in something like session information. So when I click on table, I'm able to decide exactly how big I want this table. So in this case, I'm going to say something like this. I want to start putting in information about my session. So I'm going to say I've got session information. I'm going to highlight this. And if you're on a Mac, Command B. If you're on a PC, I believe it's Control B. Or right here, you could just click the bold button. The first thing I'm going to start off with is I want to know who the client is. So client name. And I'm a little anal when it comes to this, so I like having the spaces after colons. I just think it looks a little bit cleaner. So you'll see all of that in that particular formatting. And then I'm going to go right to the client, and I want their full name. So what this is going to pull is right from the context module, that client's full name. So if I want to add more rows, because I want to talk a little bit about the session, I have these little drop downs right here. So insert row before, which would put it there. Insert row after, which would put it there. That's exactly what I want. So then I'm able to put in my session date / time. Now, this is where we'll start playing around with the form fields. If you were using something connected to a timesheet, which again will be the next webinar, we'll have all of this be automated. But right here, all I want to know is the date of my session. The super cool thing, depending on if you're going to want this time stamped or not, you can have it set to just timestamp it as today. But if you're completing your notes a little bit later, or even if you're completing notes at midnight, you know, maybe you don't want to have that put in there, but you're able to still choose your format. So I'm going to leave that blank for right now, and I want to talk a little bit about the time of my session. So here in that form fields, I can use that time box. So I'm just going to do time, space, little dash, because I think that formatting looks a little bit cleaner. And I can say time. So if you are not using timesheets, you can do it in a format just like this. You just add in one more little space. But if you are using timesheets, then you're able to have that automatically populate. So I want to do one more row. I want to pull in the diagnosis. So what I can do here, I can put in client diagnosis, and then I go right to client, into claims, and I can put that there. So this formatting, I want to make it look a little bit better. I want to make it look more fun. So this session information, I want to actually make that 2. So if I hit enter and back, now I've made that a little bit bigger. So I've got a greater heading. I want to bold these as well. So I like bolding after I put in the form fields, because if you bold before and you start placing in form fields, what that will do is it'll actually bold this as well. And in this case, I don't want to do that. So something fun that you could do that I like a lot, it's getting a little bit advanced, but I think it's kind of cool, is if you go to table, you can go to cell and then cell properties. And what I like to do is I've got this little background color. So if you click on this, you're able to choose what background you want. So let's make it something fun. Let's make it gray. So if I say that, now I've added some color to my first table. So one important note here is I want to start putting in my provider information, but I don't want my tables to connect. So I'm just going to put a little space holder in here for a moment, and then I'm going to hit table. And in this case, I want, let's see here, I want 3 rows. So I'm able to choose what I want. In this case, I want it to look in the same exact format. So I'm going to highlight these 2 tables, and then I can actually merge these cells just by going to cell and merge cell. Of course, I want to make it look the same. So provider information. I'm going to bold this as well. So I'm just going to highlight, and of course, Command B because I'm on a Mac. I'm going to center that. Same thing. I'm going to hit enter and delete. That gives me that. I did forget what color this was, so I'm going to quick check that. So if you ever change something and you forget the color, you're able to just copy that. So if you're on a Mac, Command C. I'm going to go right here, back to my cell, and I'm just going to paste it right in there. So there, I've got my gray. So now it looks perfect. So in this case, I'm going to put in my organization name first. So I can just put this in, and I can have this be the default. So let's just call it CentralReach. And then let's see here. And now I want to talk a little bit about my clinician. So that is actually going to live in the provider. So here in provider, I'm just going to click on full name, but I also want to demonstrate that these clinicians are BCBAs or they're speech or OT or they're PhD. So I'm just going to put comma, and then I'm able to pull in their credentials as well. But also, depending on how you're billing, it may be useful to put in an NPI number. So if I put in the NPI number, I can go right to provider, into their basics, and now that will auto-populate as well. So just keeping with our theme, I'm going to bold these again, and I'll clear up my little placeholder. Cool. And now, this is where the really fun things can start happening. I mean, not that this wasn't all fun, but the next table that we'll do will be really cool. This is what makes things run really fast. And if you're looking at your paper data sheet and you're like, well, how do we make this as fast as that? This is a way to do it. So I need 3 rows or 3 columns for this. I'm gonna go like 9 down. I may not need that many, but we'll talk about deleting columns as well. So what I wanna do here, I'm gonna highlight those cells. I'm going to merge them. And this time I'll do procedures used. Of course, same format I've got. I'm going to center that. I'm going to bold it. I think that formatting is still there. So cell properties. There we go. Perfect. And now I can do something like this. So right now, I'm just going to type in a bunch of different procedures that I could do. See here. just going to give you guys a few samples. And then let's see here. And then I added in a bunch of rows because now it's like, oh man, I didn't really need that many. I could just highlight this whole thing and I can go table, row, delete rows. So if you want to get rid of something or delete columns, you're able to do that as well. So you're probably looking and you're like, okay, Nick just listed out a bunch of procedures that we could use, but it really doesn't do anything for us. So what you can do here is if you click right in front of it and hit form field and add a checkbox, you can then add a space. And this will give your therapist or you yourself the ability to just check the ones you want. So let's do that for the rest of these. Again, I like the spaces after colons because I just think it looks a little bit better. So with form fields in general, if you put them next to each other like this, if I was to put provider full name and credentials right next to each other, it's actually going to merge them both into one. So it would say like Schreiber M.A. as opposed to having a period, a comma, and a space, So I typically will see something like this with the comma and then the credentials after. So I can do that. Let's see here, timer, we'll put a few more in there. Cool. So we've got those. And now it's like, now that I've identified exactly what procedures I was using in the session, I want to leave a little bit of a note. So if you're using learn drop-ins, at this time you would be able to pull in your behavior reduction or your skill acquisition. But in this case, I'm just interested in a qualitative summary on what was run. So we can do something like this. If I do a session summary, again, keep my theme, I'm going to bold it. At that point, I'm able to use a form field, and here's a rich text area because I want to be able to bold, italicize, and underline. So when I do that, the neat thing here is I want to make sure that if I'm filling out the form, I know I'm going to fill it out, but I want to make sure that if my therapists are filling out this form, that I ensure that they do. So if I click on this, any prompt I write here will be the prompt for them. So using objective language, please describe your session. Are there any areas of concern? And you can write as much as you want in here, or any comments related to behavior reduction or skill acquisition goals. So the moment I hit OK, it'll tell me that prompt. Now this prompt will be there that whole time for the therapist to complete, but when the form's completed, this will disappear and you'll only see what they wrote. So again, I want to make sure that my therapists are actually filling this out. All of this is automated. My main response requirement for them is click on the procedures that you use and make sure you write something here. So by clicking on this, I'm able to say is required. Now, any form field that you find here, you can set to being required. And that just means they must respond to it to be able to fill it out. So the next thing I've got is I want to make sure they're signing it, because not only do I want them filling it out, I want them signing it as well. So what I'm going to do, same theme, is now I can use this form field for signature. So there are a few different options. And I know I said that the other thing was one of my favorite parts of CentralReach, but this is as well. So what you can do here is you can identify who is the person that's going to be signing this. So provider, that just means the person filling out the form, they're the provider. It means they are the ones that sign it. You can add in an automatic timestamp. But here's what makes this cool. So let's start with the provider one, and that'll be there. You can lock it out and you can say, is required, or, in this case, I want a timestamp. But now for providers that want their Therapists to have parents sign. So to identify, here's what I worked on in session, you could do something like this. If I do parent or guardian, I'm going to bold this, and I use one of their signatures for client, I can do this. So if your therapist has their tablet or their iPhone or their iPad or their Kindle in front of them, by clicking that little box, once the session is done, they can walk right over to the parent or guardian and have them sign it from the account as well. Let's see here. One thing that we did not go over here was the drop down. So let's see here. Let's put in an example here. Just as a sample, coming up with that one on the fly. So was there any form of restraint used? What I can do is I can do a drop down. So you notice how I bolded things after the fact, but this time I didn't? Well, that's why. That's what happens. So I'm just going to unbold it really quickly. But if I select that, I'm able to add my answer, and I could say yes or no. And this could be for any type of field you want. So for speech and OT, this may be very, very, very useful as well to say, here are the services I was providing and here's what I did if there are set responses to some things. In some groups, for some groups, they'll have a behavior reduction section and just say, you know, what were the types of behavior, or what was the, were there any major problematic behaviors in session, and you're able to select whichever ones you want. But the difference here between dropdowns, you're able to respond one time versus this, you can click as many as you would like. So we've got session note. I'm going to change the name just so I can find it when we convert this. So you can see, oops, there's my spelling. So now that I hit save, I have my regular form. Now, some things you can do, and this will be more so on subsequent trainings or on subsequent webinars, is you can make each section required. You can add a page break. But right now, this is just one page, so we really don't need to play around with that. I can add in a header or a footer if I want to. So if I click on one of those, I'm able to put in, you know, perhaps I want my logo on the header or I want something on the footer. But in this case, we're not really going to play around with those. And I'm just going to hit save. Now, if I scroll down here to this little gear icon, this is where the copy button went. So if you're like, oh man, where'd it go? That's where it went. The piece that we've got here is you can add labels. So the template labels and the file labels. And this part is key. Make template a form. What checking that does is means that a therapist can't click outside of any of these things and change things. So without it being a form, a person can write anything in when they're completing it, but by making it a form, you cannot. So if there are any edits that you're going to want to make within this form when you're completing it, keep this unchecked. Warning about deleting templates. It's not like archiving learner trees. You delete your template, it's gone. So be very, very, very careful with that one. So I'm just going to make sure to save because I don't want to lose that one. And then this little plus button, that's how we add new sections. So if we had a bunch of sections, I can use this and I can drag and drop and put it whatever I would like. So those are the main things I've got for that. I'm going to quick see if there are any questions. Let's see here. So I'm just going to quick address some questions. Apologize for the delay. Let's see here. Sorry for the delay. Oh, can we disable or hide the CR templates from staff view? At this time, not, but that's a really great feature request. Let's see here. So if an employer does not want things timestamped, can the employee still turn that off? Yes. So with that, here in the date, I left the timestamp off, but I believe, and I have to confirm this, that I think you can still change it after the fact, and I have to confirm that, so don't quote me on that. But as long as you keep it unchecked, they can fill in whatever date they would like. Let's see here. So I got a question about signatures, and I may need a little more information. So here's what I can tell you about this. With doing something, so if you want to have somebody counter signing, so if you've got, and I'm just gonna minimize that. So if you want to have a supervisor signing as well, I'm gonna do signature, I'm gonna choose other, because this is where the supervisor will sign, and I can do that. Now, if I make this required, the very, very, very first thing I need to do when I'm filling out this form is do this, because I cannot sign myself until I fill in this field. So the thing about required fields, you can't save and you can't complete the form until that field is done. So the only way for me to be able to sign as the provider is I fill in my session summary and I also assign it to my boss. Now, my boss will get a notification in the files. So this will be just kind of another number there saying, hey, you've got something that you can sign. So I'm going to quick hit save. I'm not sure if that was a sufficient answer, but if you wanted to know a little bit more about that, please shoot me another kind of a clarifier on what you're asking for on that one. So let's see here. So now we're ready to finish this note. So I have a note without any drop-ins. So let's see here. So right here, see this little warning sign? This tells me what this template requires. Now, if I was to have anything in here from services, any single one of those, this notification would say this requires a timesheet. Now, if you have it connected to a timesheet, you will not be able to convert this note in the client profile itself. So now that we've got our note done, I'm ready to create a note in the client profile. So two places that you can, let's see here. Let's just go right there first. So I'm gonna go to the client and I wanna fill out the note. So let's say I'm providing, speech therapy. So I'm gonna go, let's go to somebody different. Let's go Locke. So I've got Locke and I'm gonna complete a form for him. So I'm gonna I've got my note and form widget. So that's where the note and forms live, and this is also where you create things in the client profile. So if I hit this little plus button, the add new, I can see all of his existing forms. So I've made a lot of samples in here. I'm gonna hit add new, and I'm gonna search for the one I want. So this was the question that I had been asked a little bit earlier. Can you hide the system forms from the employees? And not to my knowledge, I believe it's all of them, but however, the caveat there is if you have the notes and forms tied to the timesheet, the only thing that the employee is going to see is that specific one. This is just using that I believe the permission is called Notes Manage, where you're able to create notes. So I'm going to search for my webinar one that we just built. And there it is, session note webinar. You'll notice it says it requires a client or provider. Let's go back for a second, let's go here. So if I hit add new and I saw any of these gray ones kind of on the other page, see how the note says this requires a billing entry in the timesheet. So you can't create new of them if you've got those listed from the service. So we go back to my webinar one. Now we can complete the form. Oops. Let's see here. I might have to go back. I think it was because I was on the second page. Add new, webinar. There we go. And now you'll be able to choose whoever the provider is. So I'm just going to choose myself. And now I'm able to fill this in. So when did my session start? So let's see. It started on 6/23. Let's say it was today. I started working with you guys at noon. So let's just put in 12 o'clock p.m. And then I'm going to work with you guys until 1 p.m. Cool. So the next thing I can do is, if there was a diagnosis listed for Locke, and it looks like I don't have one in his account. Because this form is not listed, or because this template is not listed as a form, I can delete and change anything I want. So what I'm able to do is I can highlight that. Of course, I'm going to unbold it. And now we have that defaulted to CentralReach, my organization name. You know, the clinician, it's Midgar Corp, but I just want to change it to me. So let's go here. Got to spell my name right. Cool. If I want to put my NPI in there, I could. And then it's as easy as, what are my procedures I'm using? I used some skill acquisition, you know, a token board, some differential reinforcement. You know, was there any restraint used on this call? Well, no. You guys are really fantastic. So I'm just going to say no. And then a session summary. We talked about notes and forms. So I'm able to write in anything I want. Now, if my supervisor's here or my parent or guardian, I could have them sign it. So pretend somebody's behind me and coming back, and it's like, hey, Nick, good job writing your note. You know, I'm able to say, Nick's boss, and I can write that in there. I'm on a trackpad, so let's see. Well, you guys get the idea. So I'm able to put in whatever I want. A lot easier on a tablet. Cool. And then, now that that's done, I can sign it myself. Now, by signing it myself, this will now save and lock the form. So see that here? The distinction between saving versus saving and locking. Now, the reason it says this is because of the signatures. So when I hit save and lock, it says, are you sure you want to lock it? Once it's locked, you can't edit anymore. I can say yes. So once that's done, there it is. When I click on it, I don't think my dynamic title saved. Let me check my files really quickly. Let's see here. Oh, that's what happened. Let's see. A quick change that. Almost led you all astray, so I'm going to show you how to fix the mistake I made. So what actually happened is here in this dynamic title, it was supposed to say this. Reason being, all it was telling me was the client name. The reason there wasn't a service date is because we didn't have an appointment with it. So now, anytime I complete one, it'll say session note, client's full name, and client service date. So remember to put your full title here, and then it'll pull. So in this case, you know, because there wasn't a timesheet, that was the service date. So I'm just gonna hit save, just so I've got that in the future. Let's go back. So we're gonna go back to lock. So when my computer loads, so while that loads, I'm gonna check and see. So the question that I just got here is, can someone else sign the form later? So someone else can sign the form as long as, well, that's kind of a, here, I got to go back, and it's a little bit easier to explain that in the templates. So to sign the form a little bit later is this. So I'm going to put it in other. Other is the field that you'll need to do that. So form fields, signature. If I say other, this is the key right there. If I say other, it can still be reassigned. But if I click this box, therapist one can't, or my therapist can't assign it to me and then have me assign it to somebody else. This makes it so that nobody else can sign it as well. But by having that unchecked, I can always have it reassigned to somebody else. Cool. So that, I will open up my objectives again today. So those were the things that we've gone through. We've actually gone through everything. So if you guys have any questions, please shoot them my way and I can address that. Or I can go over things again in the last few minutes that we've got. Cool. So I haven't seen any questions, so I will hang out for the next few minutes. But thank you all for being in attendance. I really appreciated it. I did get a note saying all our forms state the footer section as a header. I believe they would just need to be reordered. So let me go back to my account and quick check that out. Let's see here. That's something that I would have to look into. If you want to send me an email, I will quick shoot you my email and I can look into that for you. Let's see here. Cool. So if you send me I just had sent you my email and then I can address that. I can look into your account and see that too. So I've got another question about the signature. So we'll review how to set up the signature on a form so a supervisor gets notified that a signature is required. So that I've got right in here. So I've already got the other. I'm just going to quick go like this, and we'll make a new form with that. So this is what you're talking about, is making sure that they're notified. So I'm going to hit the save button, make a new one. Might have to refresh. So now if I create a new form with Sabin, right down at the bottom of this is where that comes into play. So right here, this other, it says I've got invalid fields. The reason for that is I need to do my required fields before I can do any of those. So all I need to do is fill in this field and it'll turn from that to red. And now I'm able to choose the contact. So this is the answer to your question. So it's telling the supervisor. So what I can do is one of my supervisors is Aerith. So what this will do is this will give them access to it in the files. And it can also be reassigned later. So you see how now it gives Aerith the ability. I can always log into Aerith's account. Mind you, I'm in the organization one now. But if I log into her account, this note will be available for her to sign. Footer being labeled as the header. So I will look into that with I got 2 reports of that in here. So I will look into the footer and the header, kind of what's going on with that. If you, let's see here, I'm going to send everybody my email. So if you have any questions after the fact, let's see here. So if you see any of those things, please shoot them my way and I can see I can diagnose what's going on with that. So I did get a question about notifications that a signature is needed. It's just going to be listed as a new file for access. So like right here, if I go into my files, I may have to go into Aerith's account. But I've got a notification of all the new ones. There's Sabin's note. If I was in Aerith's account, I would be able to sign it as well. So when I come into the note and form, I can override it and just say, I want it to be Midgar Corp. And then I can sign it right here. So that's the same thing that Aerith would see is that when she goes to file to the note and form, and then she's able to sign it there as well. So we don't necessarily have the notification per se, other than a new file being shared. I'll wait around another second for any more questions. But again, thank you all for coming. I got a note. I got a note saying it'd be really cool task to send a notification when the signature is needed. My recommendation: please put this on the ideas portal, and I would definitely vote for it as well to get those notifications. So if the way our ideas portal works is if you guys have really great ideas and enough people upvote them, our developers will look at that and be like, huh, this is what people really want, and then we can see if we can get it made. So I believe that may be on there already. So I would just search for the notifications for that. But best bet, if there are things that you think, hey, this would make CR more awesome, definitely please submit an idea because we look at those all the time. I did get a question about making sure a boss is notified on pretty much everything, and two ways. You could have all files shared with that particular supervisor, or you could have signatures. But if the files are shared with them anyway, then they're going to see the same exact thing. It's just that there's going to be a response requirement of a signature then. Cool. Well, I hope everybody has a really nice day. And my next webinar will be on very similar forms, but using the timesheets and converting notes with those as well. Okay. Bye, everybody.